Okay, I'd like to just welcome everybody here today. It's just an absolute pleasure to be in the company of such extraordinary human beings. We're quite an international gathering today, from Australia all the way to the USA, and comprising people from different generations and journeys through the military at various levels. So it's an absolute pleasure. And also a massive thanks to Sarah Coral for just always making this group available to all of us, and her passion and her mission and her vision that keeps so many people alive and nurtured. So thank you, Sarah. Today is just an extraordinary day for me. I'm going to introduce a man that's become one of my closest friends and a brother. I've spent several years hanging around him. What he's done, I believe, is going to ripple through the world in so many ways. I'm going to do a brief introduction to him. David is a clinical psychologist who's both a combat veteran and a former first responder himself. He founded Project Healing Heroes in 2016 to facilitate resilience and reintegration for other combat veterans, service members, first responders, and their family members. Through his own experiences and clinical work, he recognized that PTSD and suicide are two of the most challenging issues facing our veterans and first responders today. Lieutenant Colonel David Tharp served as the PTS, I'm going to leave the D out if that's all right, the PTS program manager at the VA Medical Center in Waco, Texas, which was the third largest program in the country for the Department of Veteran Affairs. He's also Lieutenant Colonel in the Air Force Reserves at the United States Air Force Academy, and experienced firsthand the cost of war on our military men and women and their families after serving as a NATO medical advisor in Kandahar, and Afghanistan. As a medical advisor to the commander of Kandahar Airfield, David was responsible for 28 countries' medical assets and for notifying the country or service of those killed in action, as well as any civilians. His other responsibilities include medical responses to casualties from rocket attacks which occur daily, and serving as an advisor to the U.S. Army mental health team. There's a lot more to say about this extraordinary man, but the gift of having him on today is that in all my years of work, I have no doubt that the people I've sat with who embody faith certainly heal a lot better and transition a lot more effectively. Today, David will talk about his beginnings, his journey through the military and transitioning, and his forming of the most dynamic and really unusual faith-based approach. And I will briefly hold up these extraordinary 6 books that can guide people through healing over, it can almost take a period of a year. What I can say personally is that even though it's a Christian-based approach interwoven with psychological approaches, in no ways does its faith offend or challenge anyone who's not following a Christian-based approach. And I can quite happily say that. So it's a program which is valid and applicable to all. So saying that, David, my friend and my brother, I'll hand over to you. If you can tell us a bit about where you began and your journey forward. And what we will do as you finish all of that is focus on the key tenets of transitioning, which is faith, well-being, and tribe. So over to you, my friend.
Thank you so much. Man, what a pleasure and an honor. And I mean that sincerely. And all of the people that are on this call, wow, you guys are the SMEs. I could just sit back and listen to you because all the wisdom that's here just in this room is phenomenal. I never set out to join the military. My dad was in the Navy, World War II. My brother was in Vietnam, Air Force. That was never in my plans. And then 9/11 happened. And something happened inside of me that I just became furious. And that was the impetus of me joining. It was a period of time when I was working with the Federal Bureau of Prisons. I had trained at FLETC, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, did really well there. I was already a clinical psychologist, and I'd already been to seminary. And I worked on trauma level 1 centers and did chaplaincy, hospice for 9 years. And I loved all the different experiences that I'd had, but the military was not one of them that I really had ever considered. So the process of joining and how that all worked out was miraculous in and of itself. But something that Sarah said early on already in this conversation was, I just wanted to be there to help people that were in pain and suffering, in essence. And I'm just like, wow, sure, Sarah, why don't you just be like Jesus while you're at it? Because ultimately, that's what it is. I mean, if we can do something to help people that are suffering or that need support, encouragement, man, that's what I'm all about. And so, I don't know where the Lord's going to take Project Healing Heroes or all of the programs that we have. As a matter of fact, I don't even know where he's going to take us personally, but I do know that he is faithful, and I can't wait to see what God unfolds here in the next few years. Um, Scott, who's my chief operating officer, he's not here, but Tom is, and he's on my board of directors. He's super awesome. But I'll tell you, Barry has been such an encouragement to me to write. So I've written 9 books now. 6 of them were about up armor, designed specifically with a faith-based concept behind all of the research that I could find when it came to all of the treatment modalities. In the VA, I was so frustrated. Back in 2015 and 2020, there was a woman who did some research on her dissertation, and she actually assessed the efficacy of the current research modalities. And she found that out of the 2 leading ones that the VA was using in the United States, only about 1/3 of the people were getting better. And that was what I was finding too. So that means 2/3 aren't. Now, if you bought a car, would you be okay with a car not running 2/3 of the time? But yet we think that it's okay for our men and women. And that irritated me too. I don't think I get irritated easily, but it sounds like that. I've got a theme going, obviously, but it just didn't sit well with me at all. And so I'm like, you know what? I got to do something about this. So I ended up joining the Air Force and going to Kandahar, Afghanistan. I felt like that was the best place because Kabul had General Petraeus and a bunch of other people that I thought, they were going to protect them pretty well. And if I was going to go into the fight, I really wanted to go into the fight. Had a wonderful opportunity. But I really just want to focus in on the fact that God has really brought me through a series of events. And Scott, my chief operating officer, I'm going to be very bold and honest with you. When I was at the Air Force Academies, I've been there 14 years. So the longest reigning permanent party member, because most people roll in and out for 3 and 4 years. So I've been there a long time. And he called me and he said, "Hey, David, I've really been thinking about something. I've been praying about you for a long time. And I just wanted to share with you a word that I think that God has for you." And I said, "Oh, okay, sure. What is it?" He's like, I don't think you're really going to want to hear it." And I'm like, "What?" And I was like, "Okay, now you have my attention." And I'm like, "Well, Scott, what is it?" He said, um, I I don't know how to say it. And I said, "Just say it." He said, "Well, God wants me to tell you something." I said, "What is it, Scott?" And he said, "You need to shit or get off the pot." I'm like, "Wait, what? That does not sound like God." That sounds like Scott. But I'm like, "What the heck?" And so we were laughing about it. And I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, "I don't know, man. I got to go." I'm like, no. Wait. Even in the New Testament, when somebody was speaking in tongues, at least there was an interpreter here. We got to have some more information. I said, "Why would you say that?" And he said, "You know what? For somebody who God has given so much, you are doing so little for the kingdom." Oh my gosh. You talk about a shot to the heart. I was like, why would, I'd already written 3 books. I'd already started Project Healing Heroes. And I was like, why would you say that? And he said, and this isn't to make me look good. It's not. It's just this is kind of how it went. He's like, "David, who do you know that graduated from seminary, graduated #1 from their doctoral program, graduated at the top at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, is a 2-time national award winner, chaplain, hospice, combat vet, led the 3rd largest PTSD program in the country for the VA, and you're doing nothing?" And I'm like, "Okay, Scott, we're gonna have a talk about this." And I said, "What do you want me to do?" And he's like, "Hey, that's between you and God. I gotta go." And he hung up. And I was like, "Okay." So it left me in a state of a little bit of confusion. And I'll make this kind of quick because it's important. But what happened after that was me getting into a very serious conversation with the Lord. And I'm like, "Lord, what do you want me to do? What's going on?" And I don't hear voices outside my head. The ones inside are bad enough. So I was like, "Okay, God, what do you expect from me?" And all I got was, "David, what would happen when we're talking about the topic of trauma if you had a cup full of unconditional love or all of the fruits of the Spirit?" And I'm like, "Wait, what?" And he's like, if you literally had a cup full, literally it was overflowing, whatever it was, on the fruits of the spirit, what would happen? And I'm like, I have no idea. He's like, well, then find out. Let's process this. I said, all right. So I called back to my family, and I have my oldest son, and I thought I'm gonna start with patience. That sounds like a good, fruit of the spirit. Let me do that one. And so I did. I started out with patience. I called back and I said, hey, Joshua, is daddy a patient man? And he's like, no, you're terrible. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, you're really bad. Like you get angry easily, you get irritated. Mom knows it. Everybody knows. I'm like, okay, okay. It started to hit me. And I'm like, all right, hey, can you put your younger brother on because he's much more sensitive. So I'm like, can you put Peyton on the phone? He's like, yeah. Peyton gets on. I said, hey, Peyton, it's Dad. He's like, hey, Dad. I said, do you think Daddy's a patient man? He's like, nope. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, Joshua's right. You're terrible. He's like, you really suck. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, are you serious? He's like, yeah. I said, why would you say that? He's like, Dad, do you remember the time when somebody flipped you off and you got so mad? You took the car because you have a Tesla and you outraced them to their house and you got out and you threatened them on the way to church. And I'm like, you remember that? And he's like, how could I forget? And I'm like, oh man, this is not good. So then I finally was like, can you put Mom on the phone? So my wife is a psychiatrist. She's super smart. And I'm telling you, when she scored on the national exams, she scored in the top 1%. She's brilliant. So I said, Catherine, I have a question for you. And she's like, yeah, David, what is it? And I said, do you think I'm a patient man? And she said, David, don't ask questions you don't want to know the answers to. Oh my gosh. It just hit me in the gut. And so I was like, Lord, what is going on? And I'm feeling crushed. So I'm prone down on the floor. I'm in tears. Like as a father, I've failed. Like what a horrible job I've done. And I'm at the academy. I'm not home, and I'm gone a lot. And it's frustrating. And my wife's not happy when I'm not there. And it's just it's feeling it's feeling very much overwhelming. And I was like, God, what are you doing? And the only thing I heard was, David, if you're going to really do what you have the intensity and desire to do, which is help people with trauma, you're going to go through everything that I want you to go through that you're going to recommend people deal with. And I said, okay. And I had no idea what that meant. So we started the process, and so I wrote the book. And oh, sorry about that. I gotta get rid of that. Okay, so I wrote the book, and I had it. I shared it with an older lady. She's 70 years old, and I said, I've got a resource I want you to read about. It's a book on trauma, and I was wondering if you would just take a look at it and see what you think. And she's like, yeah, that's fine. So I called her back in 2 weeks and I said, so did you get a chance to read it? She's like, yeah. I said, what did you think? And she goes, David, I can't make a decision on something. I said, okay, what's that? She goes, I can't decide if you're incredibly brilliant or incredibly stupid. And I was like, man, first my family, now you. This is not going well. I said, why would you say that? And she's like, well, first of all, you did the fruits of the spirit out of order. Why did you do that? I said, well, honestly, because the fruit, having a cup full of unconditional love, I thought would be really hard for people to handle. She's like, that's what I need to talk to you about. And I said, okay. She goes, I hate you. Okay, at this point in time, my ego has taken a big serious hit. And I'm like, okay, Lord, what are you doing? And I said, why? Why do you hate me? And she's like, because for the first time in my life, I realized I have never had a cup full of unconditional love. Not for my husband, not for my dad, not from any male I've ever been in. And I started crying, and I cried and cried for 3 hours. And she goes, I couldn't stop. And I'm like, I am so sorry. And she goes, it's okay. She goes, because out of that, I finally realized what I think you were trying to say. And I said, what was that? She goes, unless we have the Lord in our life, we're never going to have a cup full of all of the fruits of the Spirit. And I finally realized I was only going to be able to get a cup full of love from the Lord Himself. And you know what? I can live with that. And that's when I realized maybe you're not as stupid as I thought. And so it was kind of one of those reactions. And so in the process, I would write another book, and I would share it with Barry and Tom and some of the other people through Project Healing Heroes. And I would just be asking them, I'd be, give me feedback. Tell us what we're doing right. What do we need to change? And our whole focus, because I knew a lot of the researchers that were doing cognitive processing therapy, I sent one of my students to Kate Chard after 3 years. He came back and the first thing he did was punch me in the chest. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, I just want to punch you. And I'm like, you just did. Why? And so he's like, because you made me go for 3 years and study under these people. And he's like, and I have a question for you. And I said, what's that? And he goes, none of them have been in the military. Not one of them have ever trained in the military. And yet here you are with all this education and training, and you're not out there. You're not helping people to the magnitude that I think that I know you can do it. And he said, I watched your 2 hour video on what happens when war doesn't stay in war. And it was so impactful for me. I was almost in tears. And so in that process, what I ended up doing was sharing with the leadership in the VA, the Department of Veteran Affairs. They have 100 people that they select every year to go into LVA. Out of 360,000, I got to be one of those 100. And so while we're going through this process, I'm like, they're not getting this. Like, we're supposed to be really understanding what veterans are going through. And they've got all these classes and they're great. They sound great, but they're not getting it. And so I said, listen, if there's any chance at all that you would have an opportunity, I have a 2 hour presentation. I would love to present it. And they're like, David, come on, man. We have this thing scheduled for months and months. I'm like, I was just offering because I just really feel like people are not understanding what we go through. And so he's like, thanks. And basically kind of pushed me off to the side. About 2 hours later, he goes, hey, can I talk with you? I'm like, yeah. He said, we had a author that can't come tomorrow. He can't fly in. And we have a 2 hour slot and I don't have anybody to fill it. Do you think you might do your talk? And I'm like, I would love it. So I did my talk. And after it was over, total silence, total silence. Half the audience was in tears and the other half were in shock. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the leadership of the VA. And they have no idea what we go through, the magnitude of the sacrifice that people make. And that really taught me something. And I don't want to ever demean the VA because they are the ones who are entrusted by God, in this country to help us go through this. But there are a lot of things that I think we could improve on. And so part of the impetus of me wanting to write the books and to create Up Armor was to be able to take an approach that I hadn't seen other people take before, which was a faith-based approach, and to integrate, like I said, the research and the experiences of what people have gone through with boots on the ground, with psychiatry, psychology, and all of that, but do it from a Judeo-Christian perspective. And so I created the outline for all of the books to be the same, and they're independent of each other. So you can actually pick up one book and just read it. All of the modules are separate too. And then after going through that process, I went up to what's called Hope for the Heart up in Plano, Texas. Dr. Eric Scalise invited me. I didn't even know this existed. And he says, hey, I read some of your books. And I said, oh, okay, great. Well, what do you think? He's like, yeah, I love them. He goes, what are you going to do next? And I said, I have no idea. And he goes, well, I do. And I was like, okay, enlighten me. And I said, well, what are we doing next? He goes, we're going to make a video series out of it. And we're going to do a study guide and we're going to make it available for people so that they can do CEUs and things of that nature. And so we're going to need you to make the videos. And I said, you do realize most people only write like 1 or 2 books. And we wrote 6. And he goes, yeah, I know. I said, that's 50 videos. He's like, yeah, you better get started. And so we kind of laughed about that. And they're not cheap. But the good news is God has provided for us. And so we've been going through what's called Make the Connection on Thursday nights, and we'll share a half of a video, and then we'll do a discussion on the rest of it. And so that's been a really fun, enjoyable experience to be able to just get the feedback from people. And I don't think that this is canonical in any way, shape, or form. As a matter of fact, what I'm hoping for is that people will give us the feedback and then be able to recommend kind of changes for what we need to do. But my goal, my passion in my heart is to be able to utilize chaplains in the process, because I think that they have a special gift and they certainly are on the cutting edge of being able to do moral injury and mental health in a way that maybe other people are not trained. And it was kind of interesting. I'm here in Waco, Texas. So there was a guy who was a coach, was a phenomenal coach here. And one of his comments was, that's when we were actually winning, not losing. But his comment was, I can teach a kid how to catch the ball, but I can't teach him how to run really fast. So the idea is, go with your strengths, go with what you're good at. And so we just literally laid down what we felt like was what God wanted us to do in creating the resources. In that process, I'll just cover a couple of different things that might be helpful for people. Besides the video series, like I said, they have a study guide, and we want to make those available to people. And so if you have any interest, I don't want to pull you away from anything you guys have going on, but if there's an opportunity and you want to come join us on Make the Connection sometime, feel free. We're happy to have you guys join us. But the real challenge of the whole process was trying to be faithful to the Lord and trying to figure out, what does God want and what does he require of us and how can we meet that need? And so we not only created Up Armor, we actually have 4 other programs under PHH. Equines for the Front Lines, which is a really cool program. We do equine therapy. A wonderful lady that we have, Barbara Epps, that runs that. And she was here in Waco. She moved away. And then 2 years later called me and she said, David, I really feel like God wants me to do this. And I said, yeah, so do I. I bought the URL called Equines for the Frontlines 2 years ago. I've been waiting for you to call me. And she's like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah. And so we created that. We also have About Face Fitness, which is the health part of it. And Scott Medor is the one who runs that. He's on our board of directors. And Barry could, maybe fill in and speak a little bit about what that looks like for people. But Scott went from 200 and I think it was like 70 some pounds to 180, and his A1C was 12 and now it's a 5.5. I mean, he has done a phenomenal job of doing what his doctor recommended, and then he's gone above and beyond to become a coach and trainer. So he provides that resource for free, especially as people get injured in the military and need that support and help. We also have let's see, PTSD University that we're working on. We want to have experts to be able to have resources online so that people can come and train and get CEUs there. And let's see, what else do we have? I already talked about Make the Connection. Did I get them all, Barry? Because sometimes okay, I think I got them all. So I would love to have an open dialogue and see kind of where your heart is and what is driving you to not only be on this call, but feel like, what the Lord is calling you to do. And if I can help in any way, I want to be able to do that. So can we go ahead and open it up for questions, or for you guys? I think Scott and Barry, if you have things you want to ask of me, I'm happy to answer.
David, can you talk to briefly summarize your 6 books, if that's possible?
Yeah. Oh, sure. So where do you have them in front of you,
Yeah, I
brother?
do.
That'd be
Funny
great.
enough, I do. Yes, strangely enough.
Okay. You're kind. You're so kind. So we started out in the process of boot camp. That one's the very first one. We had no idea how the Lord was gonna bring all this together. But a friend of ours named Brian Childress created these boot camps for men and women, and his subtitle was Naked Warrior Style. And I'm like, whoa, wait, what? What are we talking about here? And but it's a great resource, and so we incorporated it into Up Armor. The second one of the book series is The Fruits of the Spirit. And so that's the very first book I ended up writing. But I feel like it's a very powerful book because it really helps people to focus in on getting a cupful of each of the fruit of the Spirit. And so the next book, I think, is it AIT? Yeah, Advanced Individual Training. So in the very beginning, I wrote a book called the Combat PTSD Resilience and Reintegration Workbook. And the idea was to have practical guides and ways of helping people deal with trauma. So there's a lot of things that happen in the military that I think are not necessarily good for post-military life. There are things that we were good for making sure that we survived, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily good for us post-military. And I'll give you a real quick example. It's a silly one, but it works. On time is late. In the military, on time is late. So if you've got somebody who's a general, you better be there early. That's just all there is to it. But you come home and your wife says, "Hey, there's a party at 7 o'clock." You're like, "Great." And you're thinking, okay, we better be there by 6:45. And she's like, "Yeah, we're gonna be there fashionably late." You're like, "What?" And you're like, "Yeah, we're gonna be there at 7:15." We're like, "No, no, 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 no. We got to be there early because on time is late." And so it's this thing where she's like, "No, because it takes a while for people to get their, everything ready. We want to be fashionably late." Everything inside of me is like, that's not how we do it. And so it's just a very small example, but there are so many things that we're trained in the military that we've paired together. So one of the things that we really focus in on for PHH is there's a lot of things in it that we have learned to do. And we have literally paired it just like a watch. If you have like an iPhone watch, and it's designed to stay paired. But the problem is that we need to unpair some of that training because it's not good for us. It's not good for family life. And it's hard for people to unpair that. And so we go through the books and talk about what that looks like specifically. And I could share with you some examples if you want, but it's the process of impairing a lot of the training that we did. I'll give you a quick example. When we had rocket attacks come in Kandahar, Afghanistan, there was a 1945 British sound that would go off. So that they would have this sound go off. Well, that meant rockets were coming in. You're supposed to get down, right? Because shrapnel flies up. And so it is get down, wait 2 minutes, head to cover in a safe place. Well, I was in, my wife had decided to join the Air Force of all things. We don't want to, well, that's another story. But so we're celebrating her graduating and finishing boot camp. And we're at Texas Roadhouse and somebody has that sound on their phone. Well, it goes off. So I dive on the ground because that's what you're trained to do, right? Sound, ground, sound, ground, sound, ground. So I'm on the ground covered up and it hits me, right? My observing ego as a clinical psychologist was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, this isn't good. And I'm like, oh gosh, I'm that guy. Like I'm that veteran. I'm like, oh crap. So I flip over and my wife is like, what are you doing? I'm like, hey, because you have to be a smart aleck at that point in time, right? You got nothing left. You're like, I'm checking out the peanuts. I just want to make sure they're okay. And she's like, what? I'm like, yeah, we're good. And so I sit back up and she's like, what just happened? And I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, do you want to talk about it? And I'm like, no. And she's like, why? And I said, because if I do, I'm going to start crying and I'm probably not going to be able to stop. And so it really hit me at the core. After a while, I started putting the concepts together psychologically of what was actually happening. It's classical conditioning. I paired all of these responses up and I brought them home with me. And my body doesn't know that I'm no longer in a war zone. It just does what it was trained to do. So until we unpair that, I'm going to keep reacting and responding the same way. I think people do the same thing in a lot of different ways because of our military service. Again, what kept us alive in theater was important, but now that you're post-military, it can be a game changer. Barry, next one, is it I can't see it, brother. Can you show?
Yeah, the full
What's
armor of God.
Oh yeah, yeah. So the full armor of God. How can you go into war without putting on your full armor? Can't do it, right? Same thing with spiritual warfare. I felt like in order to really deal and dive into trauma, we needed to put on the full armor of God. And so we actually have in each of the books a series of things that we do, not only training, but we also have questions that we ask. And then we have a process by which we look to examples that are encouraging and positive to help just kind of drive home the point. And all of the books are laid out the same way. Is that number, is it
Yeah, it's coming
Randall?
home, number 5, coming home.
So the whole idea of reintegration, I would be glad to have turned that over to Barry because he is the expert on reintegration. But we created a resource and a way because we felt like people, when they did come home, didn't come home all the way. And even more so, it's no longer let's just say when you are in not only in the military but a first responder, you change. There is a part of you that changes, and you have to accept that there's a new normal in some ways. And some people have a very hard time with that. So we wrote a book to talk about what it meant like to come home and to reintegrate in the most effective and positive way. And then the final book is the Beatitudes. And I really felt like God was calling me to write that. It was the hardest book, I think, of all of them to write and to kind of close out the series. But the whole idea is to create a resource that you could use once a week if you wanted to for a year, or if you met twice a week, it's for 6 months. There are a lot of programs that are 12 weeks long, 10 weeks long, and things of that nature. But we wanted to create something that people could use that was in depth, that integrated all of the components that you guys are focused in on, and make it at least a year-long program so that people could not only learn as a student, but then they could then become the teacher and perpetually continue this on. So that's the whole point of why we created Up Armor and a faith-based program.
Thanks, David. And just to jump on that, I think the one thing I've realized, both in my own personal journey and working with veterans over so many years, is that as psychologists, we tend to be too quick to jump into the frontal cortex, the story. And we do our exposure therapy and our CPTs, and we've got 101 acronyms. But what we forget and what I learned was that the first thing is the connection from the heart to earn the
Yeah,
right to be a brother to the person you're sitting in front, which means, in the words of Shauna Springer, you have to move from being the doctor, the smart one with your certificates on the wall, to actually being the doc. And you've earned the right, not the other way around. The second thing I
agreed.
learned was that in forming the connection with the heart, we develop it's an alliance of trust. Then we need to talk to the body. And, faith lives in our bodies, it lives in our hearts as well. And I realized that, the primary connection and the primary modality in operating is your pull throughs. You need to look after your weapon, you need to look after yourself. So whenever I was working with veterans, I began to realize we needed to look at healing as a mission to rescue yourself. And that
Mm.
as much as you would never leave a mate behind, it's time to go back, rescue yourself, then design the SOPs, your standard operational protocols to form that rescue. And then on the way, they would come out within a session or two of pull-throughs, which could be your cold water therapy, some meditation, faith-based in terms of activating their faith and actively starting to embed in it.
Yeah,
And at the end of it, I would then look at what's left. Too many times we decide the trauma and make decisions around that. But when we form connections of love, connections of faith, connections of well-being, and connections of tribe, then look at what's left, we may be pleasantly surprised.
amen.
So I think, David, your organization very much catches all of that. So I'd like to throw this, and I want to thank you for everything you've brought tonight. And Andrew, just to say that when we do meet, you're welcome to pick up the books and take them home and really sit with them and see what you think. So we'll talk about that later. But I'd love to throw this open for questioning now. Scott, anything that comes up for you and drive this forward?
I have a
Yeah, thank you.
testimony.
Yeah, Warren, if you can just hold on 1 second, we'll get to questions real quick. Thank you. So, yeah, Barry, thanks. David, thank you for being here today. That's a lot to unpack. You've done a lot of work into what you're doing now, and I was taking a look at your website, and I had a question about something I saw in there. It was that you're developing a peer-to-peer program. Could you share some of what you're looking to do there?
Yeah, so I'm fully convinced that first of all, there's not near enough people out there that are able to help make the difference. I mean, obviously, there's a need for not only the resources, but for people who've been there, done that in a lot of ways. People, I think, respect people who've already gone through the fire. Yes, we need experts. Yes, we need to have that talent. We even have to have the Sarahs of this world that can kind of really corral us and help us to get to where we need to be. Because without that, it just doesn't work. So we're working on a peer-to-peer program within Up Armor. And so the idea is that we not only have a leader, but we have a shepherd. And the idea is to then have a group of 8 to 10, maybe 12 people, and those folks that are in that group to not only learn the process of what it takes to try to teach Up Armor, but to be there for the men and women that are in the group. There's a big difference between leading and then just being there. And that's why we also have a shepherd, because and I'd love it, if the chaplains would, jump on board, and we can somehow, Lord, find a way to be able to make this happen in that regard. Because it's one thing to do dynamics in a group, right? At least as a clinical psychologist, but then there's also the dynamics behind the scenes. And there's a lot of people. One of the things, I'll just say this, one of the things that I've learned is to ask people to give me, if you're going to ask me a very important question that you want to know an answer to, ask it to me hypothetically. And the reason why I do that is because I'm like, okay, if you ask me a hypothetical question, I'm going to give you a hypothetical answer. So that way, I'm not legally bound to do something with the information because it's hypothetical. But they often have questions, but they're afraid to ask. And I think from a peer-to-peer perspective, peers are much more willing to ask questions than they are sometimes of even people who are trained or have that doctor in front of them or whatever the case may be. And so part of the challenge that I think we need to really focus in on is empowerment and helping the people that have been there and that are in that process of being a peer to have the resources to train them how to do it to the very best of their ability. And that's why when we did Up Armor, we also created the video series. And then inside the video series is a train the trainer portion at the very end of it. So we actually walk through for the person who's actually training to highlight some key things that we want them to know about the training itself and to provide that support and encouragement.
Yeah, that's a great way to multiply your forces too, geographically, because there are so many people out there that, would be a benefit
Yes.
to receive what it is you're doing. And I know just through the power of our story, we're all about groups. We have several different groups, and then over time, you see that there's trust built in those
Yeah.
groups because people are there for the right reasons. And,
Yeah.
Sarah has shared this a number of times. You'll see people they'll jump on the Zoom into the group and you'll see a name and they might not say anything and they'll come back one or two times. Then maybe the third time, fourth time, the camera's on
Yep.
and they're listening and they're smiling. And then they venture into raising their hand to ask a question or to comment because they've gained trust because they've seen the dynamics of the group. And I think that absolutely sets the table for folks being able to bring their heart
Yeah.
and open up. And that's just tremendous. And so, yeah, it sounds like that's exactly what, to a degree, that's what you're looking to do with that peer-to-peer thing. I think that's spectacular.
As you asked that question, Scott, it's interesting. We built the system to the very best of our ability, and now one of the jokes that we made was, in the military you have O plans, right? You have O plans for everything. Every time we would do something, it would just fall apart. And with Project Healing Heroes, like we were trying to do something and get something out there or do something specific, it got so bad that we actually decided that the only way we were actually going to make this work is if we listened to whatever the Lord said and just did that. That's the end result. So our O plan is to not have an O plan. It's to have a God plan. And whatever God wants to happen, that's what we're going to do. And so even though we have all these ideas and things that we think might make a difference and help, in the end, we're just asking God to intervene and do it in a mighty way. And then we're along for the ride. Now, that may not be, at Air War College, the training they want you to have or speak on. But what I found is that if you do it the Lord's way, you don't have to worry about the outcomes because God doesn't call us to be successful. He only calls us to be faithful. And as long as we're being faithful with what he's given us, that's the key. And that's what's going to drive, I think, the success, if there is going to be any.
Yeah, can't argue with that, right? We're in his domain, so
Roger that.
that makes sense. Hey, something you said real quick, I didn't want to forget to mention this. Sarah Carell, and you said corral,
Oh,
that
sorry.
she is corralling people, and I thought, you know what? Now I understand her last name better because she
Well,
is a shepherd for sure.
what she's been able to do has been, in my mind, nothing short of miraculous and exciting. And so that's, I got a chance to hang out with her and her team, and Barry's always been there and spoke very highly of Sarah. And I just, again, Sarah, thank you so much for what you've done and for listening to the Lord. And you know what? This has not been easy. And I know you had to reach out on faith, and you're just like, what may happen with this, and what's the Lord going to do with it? I'm telling you, it's just your faithfulness in that regard and what you've been able to accomplish. I applaud you to the highest level.
Okay, Barry, I'm going to pass it over to you if you want to lead the
Yeah,
answer.
so yeah, I'd really invite people to ask questions, but just please, the questions pointed and clear at David in terms of what you'd like him to explore or any questions you do have. Um,
Yeah, the more
Anybody
specific
thinking,
the question, the better it is for me. So feel free to give me a very, very specific question.
okay, so anybody want to jump in and ask a question? That'd be great. Yep, Rand, go for it, my friend.
Yeah, I have a couple because, I don't have any experience. You guys are amazing, your backgrounds and everything. And I kind of came out of the shadows a couple years ago. And my question has to do with what part of your program deals with the two major problems that I'm aware of in veterans that have, transitioned into civilian life. Most of the guys I served with are gone. They're dead.
Mm.
And the two biggest problems I saw were, and I've seen it face to face a couple times, suicide and addiction, and particularly alcohol. And we haven't really said anything about that today, and I was just wondering how that fits into your regime. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, I appreciate that question very, very much. And the reason, so Rand, one of the things that hit me was that nobody was asking veterans what they thought their issues were. Like nobody was doing that. And I was like, what? That's the ground one or ground zero. That's where you start. So I got with Dr. Jen Robinson, who's a good friend of mine at Auburn University, and we created what's called the Veterans Challenges Questionnaire. And it was really simple. We asked veterans what their issues were. What are your biggest challenges? Whether it be, after deployment, before deployment, multiple deployments, what were they? Out of all of our research, and we've had over 500 veterans that have now taken that particular questionnaire, the number one thing besides sleep was the biggest challenge. The next one, isolation. And isolation, I believe, is the biggest killer. That is the one that I think contributes to suicide more than anything else. And if we can help
Have
people
a
feel
great day.
if we can help people feel connected, I think that is one of the most important things that we can possibly do. Because that aspect that Scott talked about was trust. I mean, you don't inherently trust people when you come into a group. It's built. You have to take time. And so we acknowledge that and respect it, but we also understand that from a biblical perspective, as soon as Adam fell out, with the Lord in regards to doing what he wasn't supposed to do, what happens? Well, they have a game, and God's like going, let's play hide and seek. Adam, where are you? And so he knew exactly where he was. Like this was not difficult, but it was isolation. He was trying to isolate because he knew that he had done something wrong, and that he was feeling he's feeling terrible about it. And so the idea is when we do things in life, whether, for example, moral injury, things of sins of omission or commission, our first response is to want to back away from it and to hide. And so anything that creates isolation, I think, is more problematic. So one of the things that we really try to encourage is to help people to understand what you're going through. And I hate to say it this way, but it really is true. You're not special. You're not special. And what do you mean by that? Because you're thinking, well, that's a terrible thing to say. No, what we're saying is all of us have these same challenges in life. All of us have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. All of us, struggle with things like depression and anxiety or whatever the case may be. And so the issue is that we want you to know it's okay. We're here to support you. And we want to do that in such an important way that we can help people know that we care so much. We will go to the ends of the earth to make sure that you don't feel isolated. And that means making connections. And that's why we created makeaconnection.org. But I appreciate the question. That was fantastic. And so
Rand, oh, sorry,
I'll
David,
just
go.
follow. I'll just say this real quick. My biggest concern is the correlation between isolation and suicide. And I think that if we address that issue, suicide will not be as significant as a problem. Because when you have people who care about you and love you and are asking about how your well-being is and how you're doing and things of that nature, it's really hard, to create isolation, especially when you know that people care.
Yeah, thanks, David. And also, Rand, I mean, what comes to me is that, the primary thing is that aloneness. And aloneness, I see aloneness as a disconnection from other. And when we look at other, it's tribe, the physical tribe, and the other one is faith, which transcends that. And then there's the disconnection from what lies in the middle of ourselves. So we've lost who we are. We've lost contact with who we are. Within that, we carry the trauma, the pain, and the grief that we live with. You put all of that together, and there's such an unbearable pain that the desire to live becomes very thin on the ground. The way to get to it, I believe, and I keep coming back to that, is we need to touch the souls and the bodies of people. So things like you doing, Kevin, taking people out into nature, vision
Yes.
quests, rites and rituals of return are critical. We have lost those. In fact, effective rites of passage barely exist today. So people don't even know where they are located and who they are. The second thing is the modalities that effectively work with bodies and things that are encapsulated, because trauma lives with the body. And unfortunately, so much of what is being developed today doesn't do too much. And there's such a mythology that feeds so many other industries. Now, in terms of if you put things like you're doing, Kevin, Frosty, the kind of stuff that you are doing with all those innovative modalities, we know they are working, and we know that they are having extremely quick results and long-term results. When we start to address the almost archaic way in which we've seen healing and reform it, when we invite people into effective tribes, and when we teach them to reform connections with themselves and have places to connect with others, and where we introduce them to something which embeds them in a faith, then the desire to drink to death or end their lives, I think, starts to go. I see it as symptomatic of a disconnect, which is from those that are responsible for bringing people back and those who get lost on the way, not only because of what they carry, but because systems are failing them, and those they sit opposite them are failing them.
Barry, something I want to make this really quick because it's too important to miss out on for some part of my story. When I came back from Afghanistan, I was not in good physical shape. We had some things happen, and I couldn't feel anything below my mid-level of my chest. I'd lost almost all feeling in my legs, and I could barely use my arms. And there's a reason why that happened with a spinal cord injury issue that I suffered. And long story short, it was 4 a.m. in the morning, and I told my wife, I got to go to the hospital. I can't take the pain anymore. Like, I can't take it anymore. And on the way to our hospital, it's about 20-minute drive, and we drive over Lake Waco. And I said, "Is the truck locked?" And she's like, "Yeah." She goes, "Why?" I said, "Because I'm going to jump out. I can't take the pain anymore." My wife is a physician, right? So she's like, "Do not jump out of this truck. We're going to go to the hospital, and they'll give you medicine. It'll be fine. It'll be okay." I'm like, I don't think it's going to be okay. And she's like, "Just don't jump out of this truck." And so we get to the hospital. They give me Demerol. It has no effect. They give me a second dose, nothing. And I am in tears, and I'm begging God to let me die. I just want to die because I want the pain to stop. And finally, I said, "Can you give me a muscle relaxer?" They're like, "Why?" I said, "You know how you have a Charlie horse, like in your leg or something? I have them all over my body, and it's horrible." So they put the medicine in, and all of a sudden, my pain went from a 10 to a 2 in like 20 seconds. And I'm like, and the doctor's like, "What just happened?" And I'm like, "No disrespect, doc, but you're the doc. What do you think happened?" And so we're having this dialogue trying to figure it out. But it taught me something. At that point in time, I didn't really want to die. I just wanted the pain to stop. And I think that people who go through suicide, that's the key. They don't want to die. They just want the pain that they're going through to stop because it feels like it's never going to end. And sometimes if you feel like there's no hope, you take life into your own hands in that regard. And so if there's anything that we can do at all to give people a hope and a future, that's what I'm all about.
Yeah, well put, brother. Sarah, you got your hand up.
All right, I am going to just change the screen real quick to the Brady Bunch here. David, thank you so much. Every time I hear you speak or we have a conversation, I always glean more of kind of your heart behind this all and what you're doing. And it's just really exciting. And just your passion of really getting it when this is so concerning, you feel that a lot of the leadership in like the VA are not really connecting. And that's heartbreaking. My question is, I know we've kind of touched on it, but do you feel, because the VA is always wanting to find something that prevents suicide, but you had mentioned earlier that there's two modalities that they use that is only maybe effective for a third of the people that come in. Are you finding any crack in the door to really start getting, like even the others on this group too, the amazing modalities that they're bringing to our veterans and our first responders is
Yeah.
incredible. So, do you
Yeah.
feel that there's a crack in the door happening at the VA?
You know, I do. I love the new director. He's a chaplain. He's a former chaplain. I mean, I don't know if you guys know that, and he's really cool. And I watched him watch on a video. He confronted somebody who was propagating some false things about the VA, and he said, I'm going to talk to you. You're the reporter who did this. You said this. That's not true. You know that wasn't true. Well, no, you own it. You own it right now. Because the fact is that you put something out there that was not true, and I'm calling you on it. Before we continue this interview, you need to apologize to the veterans and the American people for what you did, because I'm not going to continue until you do. And I was like, ooh, I like this guy. And she's like, well, I don't think that's necessary. And he's like, I'm the one sitting in the chair. You invited me. If you want to continue the conversation, this is going to have to happen because you know what you did was wrong. I care about you. You're a great reporter. You do amazing things, but you can't do this. And so I love the fact that that happened. So historically, the VA has basically said, if it has anything to do with spirituality, yeah, we're not interested, right? Separation of church and state. So they make this argument, and I think it's a terrible one, but because at the same time they have chaplains, and I'm like, look, we can all live together, and the thing is, we don't have to be seen as a threat. Like, we're not trying to proselytize anybody. We're just trying to make a difference and to help people. And we know that this works for some people. So we want to make that an option. It's not for everyone, and I know that. But if people want to have it and use it, who are you to deny them that opportunity? It's a resource that's important to them. So that's why we created it the way we did. And I basically said there's a 2-page thing that I did called Answering the Call. Because the issue is, what happens when you dial 911 or 988 or some of the other 9 numbers? There's always somebody on the other end of the call who answers it. And our job is to answer the call. Our job is not, we have a saying, we provide, you decide. We provide all these resources. You decide what you want and pick and choose for them. But I don't think it's right to say we can't provide resources to people of faith when in reality you're denying them that opportunity. And I hope that there is a crack. I really do hope that there is, because I think that chaplains and moral injury and all of those things that have a way of being able to address things are doing such a good job, and not doing it just from the psychological part of it, right? They did put it in the DSM, but it's not a C code, right? I think it's a V code. So they're acknowledging it exists, but they're not saying it's a disorder, which I agree with. So the issue is I think there is an opportunity, and I think moral injury is going to be the key to that lock, in my opinion.
It's a Z code.
Yeah. Roger that. You got it, man.
That's exactly right. What you said is exactly right. Yeah.
Quote him about quoting me. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, because we laugh all the time. That my wife is like, "Oh, David," and I'm like, "I know. I don't even know half what I'm talking about, but I try." So I just appreciate you guys being real. I don't always get things right, but man, this is too important. It is too important for us not to get right. And so I'm begging the Lord to provide guidance, wisdom, and direction on how we do this, because I think there's a spiritual battle, to be honest with you, especially when it comes to suicide. And I really believe that there are forces at work that we do not even realize the magnitude. And we're fighting this fight. We have to acknowledge that there are things that are happening that are even beyond our control. And that we have to trust, that the king of this world has got that in his hands and can do miraculous things. And I think it all comes down to hope and encouragement and support and finding your tribe. I think all of those things, if we put that together, is going to make a big difference. And so that's what I'm hoping for.
Thanks, David. Really good stuff. Good words. Frosty, hand up.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I think something else that I've noticed here, we're obviously a little bit different in Australia, behind in some things and even more advanced in others. If we're looking at some of the new modalities, and we've just authorized over here psychedelic assisted therapies.
Yep.
And from what we're seeing with that too, I think that's going to be another crack in the armor, so to speak, to be able to get through. From my own experience and from the experience that I've witnessed of other veterans going through it, these seem to be entheogens. So they're medicines that allow an ethos and something greater. And I've witnessed it myself. It helped me bring back my own spirituality and really have that faith kind of thrust upon us. So having these modalities and then linking this in, I think we're at a prime time to be able to bring out some of these things, because I'm seeing guys pick up Bibles again that I'd never thought would pick up a Bible again. So it is something that is happening over here, and we want to be able to incorporate these things as they grow.
Jason, God bless you for saying that. As I mentioned, my wife is a psychiatrist, and one of the things that she's doing is getting the training specifically on psychedelic. And there's a real push here. I think we're behind the curve in the United States. We definitely are. But if you do it the way the research is showing how to do it, and make sure that you've got parameters around it, that I think is the key. I always worry about the slippery slope, because there's so many people that want to make money out of things, and they're just like, oh yeah, we can provide that. And you're like, no, you can't. You're not doing it right. You're not doing it the way they did the research or anything like that. Not that everything has to be, exactly that way, but at the same time, it's too easy for people just to go off on their own and just do stuff. And you're like, oh my God, what are you doing? And now that you make people worse. So I think it's one of those things that we really need to do it and utilize it in an effective way. But we do have to also be mindful that there is a slippery slope, and we do not want to make sure that we got to make sure people are protected and taken care of in that manner.
Yeah, thanks, Trustee. And I know that they are doing the most extraordinary work, but it layers, in terms of creating more appropriate ways of managing trauma from the hyperbaric chambers, workshops. I just can't get away from the fact that, let's address the hearts, let's address the souls of people, let's address their bodies. Let's start off there before we go into psychobabble or pharmacology. And let's see what happens. And also when we encourage people to reconnect into tribe where they belong and can be felt heard. So, Frosty, you're doing an amazing mission. And I know I'm very grateful to have been made a part of that. So thank you.
Yeah, and Jason just put in the chat, the Z code 65.8. So it's a Z code, actually. Thank you very much for that, Jason. I appreciate that.
Does anybody else have a question that they'd like to put to the group, to David? Anything coming up?
Yeah, don't be shy, guys. And as Sarah said, if we can always take this off recording, if there's something that you want to talk about.
Yeah, I'm just thinking maybe we can close it and take it off recording so we can really get into quite a dynamic conversation, Sarah.
Okay.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you for the time here today. We went offline just for a couple of things. Sometimes we do that when we are talking about things that are maybe a bit emotional, or folks open up a little more when we're not recording. So we did that, but we did want to hop back on to close out the video and give David a quick chance to, if he has any closing thoughts and comments for us before we leave today. David?
Yeah, I just want to thank every one of you guys. If you know a person who's struggling, reach out. Like, isolation kills, and anything you can do to make connections is, I think recreating the tribe is the key. Barry talks about that a lot, and I couldn't agree more. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you all for all the things that you've done. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. And if people want to get a hold of me, feel free. It's Dr. D. Tharp at projecthealingheroes.org. So we can put that in the chat or wherever you need. But if somebody needs something and if I could be of service, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. And what we can also do, once we're done with what we're doing today, it'll go to you to take a look at if there's anything in there, any kind of editing we need to do, we can take care of all that. But then it'll come out on YouTube, and then we'll also, post it on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, other platforms, just to spread the word. And so if there's anything you want us to put into the description part, on YouTube, we can put links, we can put anything else in there that you think is germane to the conversation today, again, to get the word out for you. So,
Roger that. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you again for your time today. Barry, as always, brother, thank you for your co-hosting prowess. And of course, your accent, I always say that, and I can't close that without saying it again. But God has blessed us in so many ways, and this podcast, I think, is part of that. The people that we're meeting, whether it's through our podcast, The Power Story, bringing David on here and his program, is good stuff. And I'm very thankful. I think we're all very thankful for what God's doing in our lives. And so, with that, everyone have a great rest of your day. Have a fantastic weekend. And we look forward to seeing you back on the Veterans in Conversation next time.